Greetings and salutations. You are listening to the Into North podcast, where we take a look at the competitive side of the Commander format, also known as CEDH. I'm one of your hosts, Lyndon, aka Noobzors, and today I'm joined by my co-hosts, Matt, aka Null.
Yo.
Reed, aka Sick Robot.
What's up?
And Morgan, aka Spleenface.
How's it going?
And in this episode, we're going to be doing a listener mailbag. This is the second mailbag episode we've done, I think. But
correct.
It's kind of like making up for all the listener questions we've skipped during our very long ban list series or saga or whatever it is at this point, you know?
Our feature-length series.
Our marathon.
So before we get into that, what have you guys been up to since the last episode?
Well, I've been building a few bad decks and releasing them to the world. I ended up building and testing a Galia deck recently. What is it? Galia of the Endless Dance.
Okay,
Endless Dance, yeah.
Which is actually
is this like a
sort of fun.
1v1 because you know he's getting that aggression?
Nope.
Oh, I see.
It is a Snoop combo deck.
Yeah, I was like, that just looks
cards.
like a Snoop deck.
But I mean, like, there's some interesting stuff with it. So your commander, like, it has haste, and it only requires your stuff to be attacking and not actually connect. So you can do stuff where, like, you know, like you play Snoop, play your commander, swing with your commander and some other stuff. Doesn't matter if all of it gets blocked, and then, like, you draw the cards anyway, which is pretty neat.
Dude, I love discarding random cards.
Dude, okay, so yes, but you know what's spicy as fuck with Galia?
What?
Is Library of Lang.
Okay,
because
sure.
It means that whenever you discard a card that you like want to keep in your hand, you can just put it on top and redraw it with Galia.
I guess,
Okay.
but then you're running
Which is
Library of
pretty neat.
Lang.
So you're in
I mean,
green
yes,
red,
but
and you're trying to
still,
get a Library of Lang into play.
It increases the chances of your attacks being live. But I mean, it's
isn't Nephalia Academy only opponent's effects?
Yes.
It is.
Okay.
Yes. Library of Lang is the only symmetrical effect, or like only effect that includes both you and your opponents in that card text.
Okay.
But I mean, like, you can also do stuff with like Scroll Rack. Like, Scroll Rack's not terrible with Galia either, and you just, like, you know, do that kind of stuff. But
I don't want to digress too much, but you said there's in that type of card text. Is there only just 2 cards with that type of card text though? Isn't it just Nephalia Academy?
Tameo makes it so you can't discard.
But it's only to your opponent's effects.
Yeah.
But the things that let you discard the top of library, it's just Nephalia Academy and Library of Lang, right?
But like even stuff that triggers on like you discarding cards in general, it tends to be like if you discard cards because of an opponent's card effect.
Oh, okay, yeah.
There are very few effects that trigger off of you discarding
like that,
cards that trigger off of both you and your opponent's discarding. Because otherwise, like, it's just, Bailouts just become extremely terrible for game health if you can just discard them to a future dump.
Yeah.
Just be like, hey, look, I'm a Bailout 4 life for free.
Yeah.
Man, could you imagine that modern deck where you just play, like, Breeze Constrictor, and then you just like discard Nullhide Ferox, discard Obstinate Bale, discard Wilt Leaf Leech,
or imagine the Hollow One deck where you just like it was just the Hollow One deck, except you also just got to play Bailouts and Nullhide Ferox.
Hell yeah!
No,
hell yeah! Dude, Burning Inquiries. Oh my god!
Oh god. Dude, Burning Inquiry make 12/12 with a power gain 12 life. Okay, but for real, just on the context of, or in the context of Galia, I feel like the deck is pretty interesting. Historically, green-red hasn't been a great color combination for CDH, and I feel like it sort of makes it more realistic when you can, like, you just get Goblin Recruiter, and then your commander just wins with Goblin Recruiter plus some mana.
Yeah,
I feel like that's pretty
The one
neat.
thing green does well is creature tutors, right? And, you know, so if you have a way to...
You have this creature combo piece, you have a very cheap draw engine in the command zone, and like it just like it's a reasonable amount of mana, especially in green, to be able to win the game off of one card.
You also have like reasonably efficient counter spells, deflecting swats somehow.
Yeah, like so this is something that I've talked about a fair amount recently, is like green, like Sans Blue has gained a lot of like protective elements and counterspell-esque effects recently. to the point where like I feel like it's just a lot more reasonable to play combos in those colors and feel like they can resolve consistently.
Wait, what else has it gained besides SWAT?
I mean, Veil.
Veil, yeah.
Okay, I
SWAT,
guess it depends on how far back you.
Yeah, but like that, just like that kind of stuff, right?
Since we started the Into the North podcast, because I'm assuming all of our listeners, like, that's how they define the eras of CEDH, right?
Are we? How far back are we? Still like our partners are recent. Four color has become pretty good recently as of the printing of Gracias and Timna.
And even aside from just like assembling combos and being like reasonably costed and all of this, like she's also like a reasonably costed draw engine in green red, which like isn't a thing that we've had historically. Like it's hard to generate cards in green red for the most part. So I don't know. I feel like it's an interesting thing. It's not necessarily something that I'm interested in like dedicating a whole lot of time to because it's still green red, But that, like, it's interesting, right? Like the commander does something and it hadn't really been touched since Snoop came out. I don't think. I think it's all like 2-ish decks, and they were both like mid-power decks for her. So
I feel like
make the attempt.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting.
It would also just really tilt me to see it across the table for me because they would be playing a deck so clearly capable of blocking Timna and just would
and
never.
They just don't.
Oh man.
You also get like 6 synergy, like Xenagos making 3/3 hastes that also swing and draw you cards, which is pretty neat.
Yep.
Okay, maybe you and I have different definitions of 6 synergy.
Okay, there aren't a whole
My
lot of
Satyr
synergies.
Lord Commander combos with this card that makes Satyrs.
Okay. There aren't a whole lot of synergies. In fact, I think there are like under 20 satyrs that actually.
Are you
matter.
running?
As
Are
much
you
as
running?
Reed and you guys, as much as everyone likes to shit on me talking about like mid-power, this is
Mid-power?
Reed
Yeah,
clearly trying to sneak in mid-power content.
Okay. I mean,
Trust me, it's not high
like,
power. It's CDH.
Okay, but Reed, are you running Gruel Ultimatum?
All right, I'm done. We're moving on.
Okay, we got to spend one episode talking about Chainer. Now we're talking about Galia. We're still gonna work through our meme decks.
I mean, this is just an indication of how healthy CDH is,
Clearly, the demand is there.
The worst part is that like this isn't even something that I'm like super like invested in. Like Spleen is with Chainer. It's just like something that I built and tested for like a few games.
Okay, I'll have you know, I've
cool.
cultivated how much I don't care about Chainer, and it really offends me when you suggest anything else.
Well, so it seems like Reed has had fun since the last episode. Anybody else? Or
Not really, no.
I've been working on mid-power decks as well.
I've been playing some Hearthstone Battlegrounds.
wait, what? Dude, I haven't touched Hearthstone ever since I won super big money playing
Ever
Hearthstone
since
big
I
time.
became collegiate Hearthstone superstar noob source.
Yeah, I basically, hit my peak and just retired, retired a champion. Or a second place, whatever, doesn't matter. Who cares? Who cares?
No, dude, streaming video games is overrated anyway.
Yeah, and I guess since the last episode, I don't know, I guess the only thing worth note I'm talking about is just, how about them Toronto Raptors, eh?
It's probably old news by the time that we release this, but
Yeah, dude, Raptors
exactly.
have
You're
lost.
saying this? You're saying this, and they're gonna have been eliminated in Game 7.
yeah.
Oh God, no,
You jinxed it.
no.
Hey,
Well,
don't edit out my knock. This is real wood.
Actually, you know what, Sam? Real wooden desk.
Keep that in.
That did not sound like wood.
It's mounted on metal.
hold
okay?
on. That's real particle board right there, fellas.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. So
I will.
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have much else to say besides
All
go
right,
Raps.
beautiful.
Yeah.
I will say on the topic of auto battlers, as Spleen brought up, I am currently hard-stuck masters in TFT right now, but I'm happy that I got there. Just hard-stuck for end of season feels bad, man.
I don't know what
You don't get
anything
that-
you just said means. I have no clue.
Getting to that point where like you know that you could do better, but you just don't want to spend the time on being better, so you're just stuck. Yeah,
that's what I tell myself in every video game I play. I'm playing way below my power level. My ceiling, but I just don't want to devote the time. That's
So if I practice,
dude, I could be playing the World Series of Poker right now, but
let's move on because we've spent a lot of time.
Yeah. So next up, we've got housekeeping. Housekeeping, of course, we cover new patrons. So big shout out to new patron Smug. And another big. We would shout him out if he was actually a patron. But as with last episode, this is another call out for Jordan from the GitRog server. Own up to your side of the bet, my guy. You owe us a $1 patron subscribe. So,
okay, Lyndon, you should bet someone on the Frog server for how long we'll continue to call out Jordan for not
do the over under on it. Yeah,
exactly.
So that's housekeeping. Big shout out to Smug for actually becoming a patron.
Okay, we can't not say you rock. So
okay, wait, but does saying you can't not say you rock count as saying you rock?
I counted 3 times that we've all said you rock. Never mind. I was gonna be like, can I say 3 times and then if I say it, then that becomes a third time? But it's too strange to consider. Anyway, getting sidetracked.
Our patrons really help us, create this podcast, and we really do value their contributions. As much as we may be memeing about whether or not they rock.
100%. Especially at the current important time where we're all still sort of embroiled in a global pandemic.
I don't know, man. What are you talking about? Look at the United States, man. They're going on as if it's all over. It's gone. It's done.
Are we really going to get into this?
No, we're not getting into this.
But seriously, it means a lot, especially now that you're willing to, spend the time, spend the money, and we super appreciate it. As always, the money goes toward paying our ever suffering editor and upgrading the podcast, making it better for all of you.
Yep. So moving on to new developments. So Azrael reached out to me. You want to get us to shout out a upcoming tournament, and this is called Oktoberfest. It's a CDH tournament that's going to be held on Saturday, October 7th at 11 a.m. and it's run by I Sleep Too Late, who I believe hosted or
has
organized several CDH
tournaments. Yeah,
and I think Reed has won.
Including the tournament that was the, I guess, genesis of this podcast.
Correct.
That was partial credit.
Both me and Morgan were runners up to Astral Codex.
Hey, that was a fantastic game of Gin Pong.
Oh my god. I feel so bad about that game because I could have just tutored for an apprentice necromancer and I didn't. I was like, no, you know what? I'm taking this Gin. We're doing this.
At least you didn't play a fetch land into an Aven Mind Sensor and then lose because of it. So
nice.
But anyway, so continue on with the tournament details. It's a free to enter tournament. With up to $600 in prizing for the top cut,
which is
huge.
Huge prize pool.
Yeah, registration opens on Thursday, September 17th. So I think that's going to be
after this have released this, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So if you want to register, I think you can join their Discord, and we'll be linking to that in the description for the episode. Next up, Reed, new developments. You got this one. So is your area.
I guess both of these are sort of my area, unless Morgan wants to chip in for the second. But first one, I think we covered this fairly recently, but there's a new database update. We're still working hard. Sinestro's doing a lot of work as the new guy on the team, but he's been dedicated a lot of time to getting the stuff out.
Is that the season's past guy?
Oh god. There's also, I don't know if I mentioned the new website last time.
Hang on a second. Sorry. Yeah. In before which is exactly what Sinestra's going to type in the Into the North server or potentially the YouTube comments.
Slam face into keyboard, roll a bit, hit enter. Yeah, so I mean, I don't know if we mentioned the new website. I think we have, but again, new website. As long as, like, also being good for everybody visiting and easier on the eyes and a lot easier to use. It also makes our job a lot easier by streamlining the submission and review process. So big thanks to Average for that. Yeah, new update. If you have a deck that you think is significant enough and strong enough to go on the database, feel free and please do submit it. Yeah, check it out. Also, I think we topped over 150 submissions for the last submission period, and I think it's only been growing, so thanks to the community for that. Also, thanks for making our lives harder and making our jobs harder, but, you know, it's all for the greater good.
Someone out there needs to write a program that just generates, like, CDH decks and, like, just make submissions to the database, yeah.
So yeah, that's a pretty big update. And then also, by the time this comes out, should be publicly announced who's getting in. But as of the time of this recording, I don't think I can announce the results for this. But the r/cdh Discord and Reddit server, Discord server and Reddit. There we go, subreddit. Okay, let's restart this. The r/cdh Discord server and subreddit have opened up mod applications, and I believe have closed them as of the time of this episode being out. And we should have a bunch of new additions to the mod team, which is super exciting because, I mean, we've already had a bit of an aging moderation. I wouldn't say aging. I guess, like, it's just people, you know, migrating in and out and not being super engaged with the community, so it's awesome to get some new blood in. And yeah, keep your eye out for that announcement.
And there's also the virtual LGS nights, right?
Yes, that too. Yeah, the CDH server, if you want to check it out, now has a virtual LGS night on Thursdays, where to replace the loss of a lot of physical LGSs around the globe, we're doing virtual LGS hangouts. So everybody comes together, plays some games on Trice, talks, BS's a bit, roasts each other while they're playing games for their bad plays, all that good stuff. So if you want to check that out, go to the discord.gg/cdh Discord server and hop on for 8 to 9 p.m. on Thursdays EST. Yes, got that one right. Yeah.
Cool. So that takes us into the main topic of the show, which of course is the mailbag. So we've got a couple. I guess we've got one quick one first, and that comes to us from listener Anno. Anno asks, "How did you talk about the ban list for 6 hours without a single threat of violence towards someone with a dissenting opinion?"
Good question.
So the answer is,
we did.
We got a lot of the heat out in the pre-show while we were writing the show notes.
The show was actually recorded. You know, we weren't actually recording over, you know, Discord or anything. We were in the room, and we each had two guns pointed at, you know, someone else on the podcast.
Yep.
And that's
every time someone had a bad take, you move your gun to point at them instead.
Yeah,
of course. And of course, thank you as always to our long-suffering podcast editor, Roko.
Yeah. Honestly, I think we spent more time in pre-shows for the ban list episodes than we did actually recording. And a lot of it was getting a lot of the argument out of our system. Rather
finding
than just
where we
having,
need to compromise.
Yeah. And like try to figure out like what talking points we could actually get through and agree on, or at least agree to disagree for a lot of stuff. Yeah. Because otherwise, pretty much the entire episode would have been the divine intervention extra. And it would have been like a 5-hour continuous argument for each of the episodes. So, you know.
Yeah, I mean, even after all this time of doing the podcast, pre-show on contentious topics can take a long time. There's definitely, you'd think that after all this time, maybe we'd be like, oh, let's just, get on with it, and we're like agree with a lot of stuff, but no. And honestly, I like that aspect. I like that we still get heated.
I mean, I think we have also gotten some feedback at this point, and I mean, let us know what your opinions are. But from the majority of what I've seen, like, people really like that we have differing opinions that we express and debate a fair amount, at least, on the podcast. And I feel like we give a fairly good range of opinions on the topics that we cover. So,
okay, then. Next up, Matt, why don't you read this one?
Sure. Do you think Darkseid would be more reasonable if it was only artifacts and not enchantments? And this question was authored by Hisp.
So, I mean, the short answer is yes. Anything that makes it generate fewer treasures,
absolutely yes, is
a good thing in my books. But it is interesting, like, how playable do you think, like, would it be? I think it would become much more of a meta consideration, because I think that, like, particularly, no one plays anti-enchantment, but you definitely can play anti-artifact. And so I think that there would be like a more realistic thing where it was like the decks that historically have run like Meltdown, like the more stacksy decks, like it can actually just be like more or less blank. I also think that it's like a much more appropriate, like from a flavor perspective. First of all, like artifacts are much more like physical objects, which I think fits the flavor of the Darkseid Extortionist, but also just red doesn't interact with enchantments.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good comment on that. Where like it's always like sort of stuck out to me that like Darkseid interacts with enchantments at all, considering it's not really red space to do anything with.
You think it'd be kind of like treasure nabber,
Yeah, like I was actually sort of considered like I was sort of
treasure nabber should take carpet of flowers. Change my mind.
Oh my god. But yeah, I feel like it would like, so if we're talking about like flavor in general, and like getting a bit deeper into that topic, I feel like Darkseid should like realistically be like only interact with artifacts, but interact with artifacts more directly, if you know what I mean. Like, rather than just, like, counting the number of artifacts that people have. And like,
I mean, I don't know.
Treasures.
I think that's, like... That's a reasonable...
I feel like it's a very reasonable effect, but,
like wow, these are some nice artifacts you have. It'd be a shame if anything were to happen to them.
But I feel like it would... I don't know. If it had, like, a bit more of a direct effect, it would make more sense to me. But I definitely feel like it's, like, acceptable that it would, like, see artifacts and make treasures. But the enchantments has always sort of been egregious, in my opinion.
So I feel like Darkseid should have some kind of, like, taxing effect, like a smothering tithe or heuristic study. Like,
yeah, right.
You have to pay one for each thing, and, he's extorting you.
I was about to say, like, or, like, pay 2 mana for each artifact you control, or else he makes
a treasure.
A treasure. Which I mean would like obviously be worse, but like I'm sure you could tune it to be like still pretty good. Yeah. I don't know, just like bring in more of the extortionist side of that, where like you're actually making your opponents pay rather than you just gaining from it.
Now we are getting into a bit of r/custom magic tier. So unless there's anything else to say here, I think we should move on.
I just want to small tangent, not actual tangent, just a comment. That's my favorite series of posts on Magic the Shitposting, or Magic the Circle Jerking, rather, the subreddit, is the bottom 5 custom Magics posts of the week. Oh. Dude, it's so good.
Yikes.
That is the first thing I'm looking at after we film this.
Yeah.
Dude, this guy's been compiling them like every week for it's like the past year, and they're all just so good.
Nice. Okay. Read one, you get the next one.
Yeah, sure. So this is actually a pretty meaty one, and I'm pretty happy to go into this one a bit. But the question is, the proliferation of free spells in CDH with C20, and I mean, sort of in the last year or so as well, with like forces of negation and all that stuff, begs the question: how do you play around free spells? Do I snap off main phase spot removal to clear the board of commanders before attempting to combo off in fear of swat and fierce of will, other than as fierce guardianship? That's by Bust Rod. Interesting question, right? It's certainly a change to the game that hasn't really historically been an issue. I mean, like, I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, but the feeling of most people historically in CDH towards stuff like Path of Negation or Force of Will is sort of just like, unless it's very, very telegraphed, it's just really like, if they have it, they have it.
I think yes anyway. And no. I think a lot of like there's definitely enough free interaction at this point where it really just, to me, it kind of boils down to, if everyone is open with a full grip of 7, right? It's what different counterspells can stop my combo. You know, if let's say I'm doing something like an Adnaz, well, basically every counterspell in the format stops that card. So, you know, given that scenario, you know, how many different counterspells are people running? How many cards do they have in hand? How much mana do they have open? They basically have access to everything. Probably not the best time to combo. But, you know, as you start narrowing things down, it's like, well, they don't have 2 blue, so they can't hold up. You know, they're not able to use a counterspell. If I'm trying to cast my commander, like a Gitrog monster, you know, great counterspell target. They don't have access to mana drain. They don't have access to counterspell. Maybe they have a delay and force of will. Those are the only 2 options. Right, so like to me, the free counterspells are just whittling down. Right, if they don't have access to mana, then you're just whittling down the amount of the counterspells, and so it becomes. When does it cross the acceptable risk tolerance for going for it?
But what I'm saying is, like, historically, before the like mass printing of more of the free counterspells, like SWAT, like Fierce Guardianship, like Force of Negation, when it was only really like Force of Will, Pact of Negation, potentially Misdirection. Not a lot of people play Misdirection even now.
Damn shame. Yeah,
I agree.
I mean, agree, but I'm gonna finish this point. I feel like at the time before all of these new cards were printed, it like a lot of the idea behind like casting like a game-ending spell was you were just accepting that them having a Force of Will or Pact Negation was just a risk. If like it wasn't like heavily telegraphed beforehand, right?
I mean, a lot of times when people combo, they're never 100% safe.
Yeah,
right.
But like,
so it's just like risk tolerance, right? It's
the whole thing was always like, oh, you have like 1 blue open. Well, that means you can have like Swansong, Dispel, Flusterstorm, and then of course like you can also have the Pact of Negation or Force of Will. But I'm not going to count those because like you would just have them anyway, and like it like you holding up a blue isn't really gonna like telegraph those, right?
I don't think that's like necessarily completely true, because there are times when your level of risk tolerance does not, you know, playing around Force of Will or Pact of Negation are things that, you know, you can do. So you're not gonna just jam into a potential Force of Will or Pact of Negation, right? Like that, I feel like that's kind of always been the case, depending on circumstances. I mean, many times it is, if they have it, they have it. But no, you know, it's not a universal truth that you know.
But that's sort of what I'm saying is like outside of obvious telegraphing, the historical mindset has always been like, if they have it, they have it. Obviously, like there's ways that you can tell if somebody's telegraphed Force of Will, i.e., everybody before them taps out. They're the last person in line. They also tap out. It's like, hey, like, yes, they could be risking it, but there's a real chance that they like had the Force of Will and they felt safe because they had it.
But I think that maybe the mindset of some people, although I don't agree that that's necessarily a universal, you know, historic mindset even before the printing of newer cards. Because if you were in a dominating board position, right, and let's say you're able to, you know, draw a bunch of cards, and you basically got the game on lock, you've got like you just like, you know, Narset or your Notion Thief or something, and your opponents basically have no cards in hand, and you can go for it right now, but, you know, it's like, do you? If you're like, well, I can afford to play around a Force of Will or some free counter magic, if I wait it next turn and then, you know, draw some interaction myself. So like in those kinds of cases, people will take the route because they can afford to play around it. But if you've got a very narrow window, right, you go for it if there is your risk tolerance is low.
I guess the point was just that like historically it's more been the case that you just sort of accept free counter magic as like something that you might just run into, but don't necessarily like fully taking into account in calculations. Whereas now it's more of like a very real consideration of like, yeah, they're running like 5 cards that could stop me off of 0 mana here. I actually have to like make these considerations and be like, okay, like, can I afford to play around this stuff? If I can't afford to play around this stuff, do I even go for it here? All that, like, you know, that mindset.
Yeah, I think the important thing with the newer counter magic is like ultimately there's only one free, you know, counter spell that got added. Well, I guess no, there's 2 because of the fierce guardianship. But like, you know, SWAT and a lot of these things, they're not really counter spells, right? They're cards that prevent, you know, like can counter your counter spells.
Well,
if it comes down to it,
unless you're playing Peer into the Abyss, but you know.
Yeah, you're playing Peer into the Abyss.
That's a hard counter, right there.
You're about to like play some aura or something that targets whatever. Yeah, sure. But you know, if you're just doing some
crowd, not a great card. Dude, Oblivion Crowd just gets worse and worse every set. How does it feel?
I mean, that card is very narrow in terms of, you know, being mainly used for like cleanup step wins or stuff. So, you know, most of the time don't even really notice it, but you know, that it hurts a bit. It hurts a bit. Yeah, so what I was saying was like the counter spells aspect is it factors in a bit, but I think a lot of it too is just the fact that you've got to be aware that your protection, it just gets a lot less effective, right? Because in the past it would be something like, you know, oh, I've got my my win, I'm going to go for it, and you know, if they have a force of will, I have this one piece of counter backup, right? So they have to have exactly force of will, and then if they do, you know, I've got my counter backup. Or if someone, you know, has one bit of open mana, you know, it's like, okay, well, I can counter this, and I'm not really, and I'm like in the clear. Whereas with all the you know, swats and stuff like that, it just becomes way worse. Like if you're trying to resolve a creature for the win, right? You're only worried about you're not worried about force of negation or fierce guardianship, but all of these things, they, you know, SWAT, guardianship, force of negation, misdirection, if people run it, like these are all great at stopping your protection. And I think that's one of the big things, is not just, you know, whether or not they have the stop, it's whether or not your protection is enough to get you there.
Yeah. Morgan, I know you really sort of had something to say on this topic. Anything to add to that?
I mean, I think that there is. It's certainly not just pretend they don't have it, barring it being telegraphed. I think that in like the tricky evaluation is always, you know, what are the odds that someone has the free counter magic? So, you know, maybe I want to try and find a piece of protection or just wait until I have mana to cast my protection. But I think that practically it does often wind up becoming assume they don't have it, because like when you're presented with a window where everyone's tapped out, right? Let's pretend that everyone's tapped out, you know, and there's like the expected value of counter spells that are available is like 0.5, and you have a piece of protection that next turn you'll be able to cast along with your win attempt. Like, what if next turn there's a total of 3 blue mana untapped? You know, the odds that there's 1.5 pieces of interaction being presented are very, very high, assuming you're playing against decks that have a decent amount of interaction. So, like, I think that it's often, like, you should evaluate each situation, and you may find, like, oh, I think that person's actually going to tap out again because, you know, they want to curve, you know, like, it's the Kess player and they just tapped out for something on 3, and it's like, well, I think they're going to want to cast Kess next turn or whatever it is. So, like, there are times where you can sort of do an evaluation and think that there isn't likely to be extra interaction on the next turn. Or maybe you think someone's going to try and go off and that might eat some interaction, whatever. But, like, you definitely, you can, you know, if you play around everything, you'll never win. But you should just be aware of, like, it's still probably the best opportunity to go off is when your opponents are tapped out.
Yeah.
And it's likely that if you give them a turn cycle, there will be one more than however much interaction you can present by giving a turn cycle available that wasn't available then.
Yeah. I feel like the new printing of free counterspells is really more along those lines of like it increases the gray area of like estimating whether or not like you can go off that turn. Or like it just makes like free like people with no mana like more of a factor in considering like they have like like 3 blue total open across the entire table, but now like you're also just taking into account like way more because of the free potential counter magic. That being said, I did sort of want to touch on like the second part of this question, asking about the do I snap off main phase spot removal to clear the board of commanders before attempting to combo off?
If you can.
If you can, yes. But also, like, I think this touches on something that, like, I don't know, I've been a big proponent of for a while. Like, probably for, like, years at this point. But, like, it's sort of like a quiet play optimization that I haven't seen a whole lot of people actually commit to or perform. Which is the idea of, like, before your turn, or if you can afford to move through phases on your turn, spending removal on somebody's mana rocks or dorks before going for a combo to limit their mana. Say somebody's like only source of blue mana when you're untapping or going through phases is like a Felwar Stone or a mana rock. Like snapping off a Nature's Claim on that mana rock to empty their mana before going through has always been sort of like something that I think is like very important to keep in mind as a play.
I think that's
like
I totally agree with you. And
Yeah,
one thing
absolutely.
one thing I've gotten mad at people when I see them play, you know, and I try to do this myself, is to counter that is proper tapping.
Yeah.
Right. If you can, I see so many people leave up like, you know, Felwar Stones or Birds of Paradise or, you know, like a Fintorn Elves or something. When if you're not going to go to combat, if you're not going to use it, then you should be leaving up a land and tapping that creature instead.
Especially,
well, I mean, the argument is typically with something like Felwar Stone or Birds of Paradise, like, what would you rather have?
More color options.
Birds of Paradise or Tropical
and
Element,
it
right?
presents
like,
more in the case of like, oh, I'm getting wheeled. Well, I'd rather have the mana open for like a Vampire Tutor or like something, or I'd like to be able to represent like a silence or a removal spell as well as a counter spell, right?
A lot of times, it's you've got to make the decision between that and the removal, right? Like there is
mana episode when
but sort of what I was getting at with sort of bring that to attention is that like I think it's like part of that equation now is like in that style of optimizing play and thinking about alternate uses for your removal and being like, oh, okay, like I can use this to help force through my combo rather than just like removing mana sources. Now a very real thing to think about when you're thinking about, I have extra removal in my hand, I have the mana to use it, and I want to go for a combo, can I use this productively to try to force through a combo, is now like looking at removing commanders before going off.
You need to be cautious with SWAT, right? Because you're not taking them off of SWAT. All you're doing is if it's like a spot removal thing, like Abrupt Decay or something, right? On their, let's say, Vile Smasher.
I mean,
they're just gonna swat it to something else, right?
If you have a combo piece in play,
you risk it getting swatted to your own stuff.
But like if you're gonna try and
obviously,
if you're gonna try and resolve Animate Dead on your Razaketh, like and you swat and you decay their commander and they swat it, you know, that's not.
Especially like doing
I'm more thinking like if you carefully work out your mana for your combo turn and then they swat it and, you know, take away your
step, sure.
Soul
but
ring.
I'm saying like obviously you can think around that as well if you think they specifically have SWAT, but like if you have the extra mana and the extra removal spell during your combo turn, you can just do it in a main phase, right?
Sure.
But what I'm saying is like I don't think this is going to be a situation that comes up a super large percentage of the time, but I think it's definitely something that, like, in the same vein as I'm going to consider burning a removal spell to basically trade mana down with one of my opponents in order to take them off of interaction, I think there's a very similar line of thinking that you should probably be thinking through in your mind when you have a removal spell in your hand and a potential combo turn, where now it's also correct to think about removing commanders in order to take them off of SWAT and Force of Will, or Fierce Guardianship. And also, I guess, technically Deadly Relic, even though it seems like I'm the only person that plays that card.
Yeah, fair. You might just be the only person.
I don't know. Does anybody else play Deadly Relic? PM me. Let me know. At me in the Discord.
I've seen Deadly Relics in the wild.
I think one last point to this is it's definitely easy with Thrasios and Tymna to be landing your commanders and kind of having the eternal bluff of either a Fierce or a SWAT. But if you are on like Hess or like a higher CMC commander like Kenrith, trying to be as proactive as possible, but landing your commanders does provide you the benefit, and kind of the opposite side of this argument as representing the bluff. Like if you expect your opponents are counting
definitely a reasonable bluff to just
play your commander.
It's definitely a reasonable bluff to just slam Kess on 3, just confidently play it, and then oh shit, is that the Fierce Guardianship? God,
maybe not if your opponents have very visible Gilded Drakes. You know,
that's the confidence of a man with a free counterspell. Yeah.
No, that's why you bluff the Fierce Guardianship, but you actually have the SWAT for the Gilded Drake.
Yeah, so you just redirect the Gilded Drake. Good stuff.
Okay, Morgan, you want to get the next question?
Sure. This question is, how do you count the cards involved in a combo, and what counts as a prerequisite? As an example, Icecrown Scepter Dramatic Reversal is generally called a 2-card combo, but you need non-land mana sources. Are those part of the combo? Are those a prerequisite? And this is definitely an interesting discussion. You know, we brought it up.
And this is by
this is by Noah the Shoeman. We've touched on this a few times before. I think one of them was in the context of like Hulk and Hulk packages in particular, which were
which is it's less of a direct like comparison than Icecrown Scepter, because like you don't need stuff like in play. You don't have to have like drawn into things and then played them before you do Icecrown Scepter stuff, but like it's still like a deck building cost.
Yeah, I think that they're like, it is still an important thing to be counting how many cards a combo requires in terms of deck building, not just actually finding the pieces.
I mean, I think this can also kind of be extended beyond just combo cards. And something that I'm sure you guys have all thought about for your decks, and I'll talk about it from my experience of Gitrog, right? How many different slots in your deck, are dedicated to, different purposes? Because the thing with tutors is that because a lot of, like, let's say just use a creature tutor, not even like, just demonic tutor. If you put let's say your deck normally only has Nature's Claim, Abrupt Decay, Assassin's Trophy, or something. But then you've got 3 ways to remove artifacts or enchantments, and those are only accessible through tutoring via your, demonic tutor. So if you've got demonic tutor, Imperial Seal, Vamp, let's say you draw the line there, you've got 6, artifact enchantment removal. Now, if you throw in 1 extra card into your deck, let's say a Caustic Caterpillar, now you've got a Caustic Caterpillar, your Green Sun Zenith, Finale, Worldly Tutor, Survival of the Fittest, like all these creature tutors are now also artifact and enchantment removal. So you've got this kind of thing where the way you count cards and different slots and purposes is heavily affected by the card type and its accessibility via tutors. So I know this is kind of like a bit of a tangent to specifically counting combos, but I just thought it was interesting to maybe discuss that too in terms of deck building and considering, cards and counting slots and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that for something like ISO-Rev, I would say that, assuming you're, like, if we're talking about it in the context of Thrasios here, where you just have to make colorless mana, I would certainly consider it a 2-card combo, and then I would note that there's a prerequisite. But it gets a little bit hazy. Like, what if we're doing something with like Intruder Alarm, and we have to cast, like, I don't know, we're doing Shrieking Drake Intruder Alarm for some reason. Like, I don't know.
But yeah,
I can't think of a deck that would resemble something like that. But like, okay, now we need something that taps for blue mana and something that taps to net us mana. Okay, well, how many creatures that tap for blue mana are you running? I think one of the interesting ones is Inkinnon, like, is freed from the real a 1-card combo with the commander or 2-card combo with the commander, because all you need is a creature that can tap for blue.
Sure.
I think in the case of like extreme commander synergy, where like you are dedicating a ton of slots, like mana dorks, to just like generic value, possibly. Actually, not even just cards that synergize with your commander. Cards that synergize with your strategy. They can be commander-centric strategies or not, doesn't matter. But at that point, I would count kind of top-down, where I would think of the cards that aren't... Like, the amount of cards that you'd have to include where it's kind of... Those cards enable the combo... Maybe I phrase that kind of.
If you'd be running that card anyway,
like,
that's kind of what I think in Gitrog, right? Like, there's been iterations of, quote unquote win con builds and win conless builds. So the current iteration of Gitrog wins with Finale of Devastation and Deathrite Shaman. Like, you can do those kinds of loops there where you're burning people out with Deathrite Shaman activations. These are both cards that would be running that the deck would be running anyway. So I don't count those as combo pieces.
Well, but those also aren't cards you need to find to set up your combo.
Like, okay, but I was gonna say, for I guess with like Birds of Paradise and these kinds of cards, like, if let's say there's and I guess it does get into a bit of a gray area, because there's if there's not enough of the cards, but like, so you're gonna be running birds anyway, right? And you're gonna be running a certain amount of creatures that satisfy that taps for a blue criteria, but you're also running all kinds of like creature tutors, right? Like, you're gonna run Green Suns and blah blah blah. So you can count those as cards you'd be running anyway. And if it's above a certain point, let's say I'm just pulling this number out of my butt, but let's say you had 15 cards that satisfied that condition, I don't think I'd count that as I think I'd count it as a 1-card combo with Free from the Real, because there's just such a high density of versions of that effect. But if you have to go out of your way to put extra versions of that effect into the deck, or there's just not a lot, then I'd start leaning more towards calling those combo cards.
So I would say I actually sort of want to tack onto that a bit, because sort of a bit of an expansion on that is that I agree that I think it's sort of related to how many cards you're playing in the deck anyway, and what your likeliness to draw into them is, or have them on hand when you're ready to go by drawing the real combo piece. For context, when building Hackball and when optimizing it and trying to get the right number of hacks, because it's really the first time that I've had to, and potentially the only time that I've had to deal with this in my process of building a deck, is in Hackball there are a lot of color hacks in the format, right? There are I think like over 15 functional color hacks.
Oh wow.
Yeah, like there's like a lot, like there's more color hacks realistically, I think, than you would want to play in a deck. So you're looking at paring down to like the best color hacks, but there's still a combo piece, right? So for me, like we did some of the math, and I think it came out to like the optimal number that you like, the optimal type or number of like one type of effect that you would want to be able to consistently draw it within your first 2 sevens. So your first 2 mulligans or hands is around 15 of a single card effect. I think including tutors for it. But
what does consistently mean in this?
Yeah, that's one thing I have with hypergeometric distribution calculations, right? It's like often you're just setting an arbitrary threshold.
Yeah, but the hypergeometric distribution for this, I think, was with 15 copies of any effect in a 99 card deck format, in the first 7 mulligans, I believe you had over 90% or 95% to have it in your opening hand, to have at least one copy of that effect in your opening hand, or like opening 2 hands. Sorry.
But I mean, obviously, that's way too many, right? Like,
that does kind of seem overkill.
But like what I'm saying is, like, at a certain point where you're playing enough cards of a certain effect, i.e. hacks in Momir, or green creatures in Momir, or dorks that produce blue mana in Kinnan, or
you should stop counting that as part of the combo.
Discard outlets in I'm assuming like discard outlets and Gitrog as well. Like, obviously you're not at that point right now, but like realistically Gitrog could get to the point where you just always have a discard outlet in your opening hand, right?
Yeah, there's ones that we don't run, but we have so many tutors that it's almost never an issue.
I think realistically at a certain point, when you can consistently count on having a copy of a certain effect in your opening hand, you can almost sort of stop counting it as a combo piece. Realistically, you still want to call it a 2-card combo if you have to find one of those effects, but realistically in the process of most games, where you can consistently have half the combo on tap, consistently accessible, you can stop calling that a combo piece and call it more of like a 1-card combo rather than a 2-card combo where you're playing a lot of the second effect.
I definitely agree. It's like a card that you can be confident that you'll have access to it in a reasonable set of circumstances, and like if your deck is a turbo combo deck and like you need to get it on the mulligan, that you do have to have like the proper distribution. But if it's like you're on Tymna and you're valuing, like I could reasonably see that number being lower because it satisfies like the reasonable expectation to have access to it consistently.
I think one thing that's interesting about this question, and because I agree with Reed, right? Like this is about talking about if a card is a 1-card or a 2-card combo, right? But in terms of how do you count combo cards, you can talk about it like that, or you can talk about in terms of deck slots. Because I think, Reed, you'd agree that you would count all of those hacks as combo card slots in Momir.
Specifically, yes. So the interesting thing is, like, I know it's gonna sound like I'm shilling Hackball, but I think I'm legitimately just talking about Hackball in this context because I think it's a very applicable deck building strategy, just because of the weirdly how many cards of each piece of the combo you can play.
Stop shilling, not shilling Hackball, and get to
it. but so like really, it's really interesting because I would count all the hacks as combo pieces because they're not necessarily like
cards you'd want to run anyway.
They do have applications, obviously, outside of the combo turn. You're not unhappy to draw into a glimpse of nature on a non-combo turn. You can still do things with that. The hacks can still technically serve a function outside of the combo turn. I still count those as combo cards. The interesting thing, though, is that every green creature in the deck is also technically a combo piece because your combo is green creature plus hack plus Momir, right?
Yeah.
And yet, a lot of them I would not count as combo pieces because you're playing them anyway, right? So it sort of counts. Yeah. It sort of goes back to what Lyndon was saying earlier, where there are a lot of cards where even if you have to find them and get them into your opening hand, if you're playing a lot of them and you would be playing all of those cards anyway, they're not really counted as combo slots, even in deck building.
One thing that's kind of interesting that I think may just be sort of an area where people are inconsistent is that I think that counting combo cards in terms of deck building also has a tendency to bleed over in terms of when counting them in terms of assembly. So as an example, the hacks are certainly combo cards when you're building your deck, they're combo slots.
Yes.
But then you're saying, if you have enough of them, you might not consider them a combo piece, but we're nowhere near that number. So there's certainly you have to find them as a combo piece to assemble your combo. But that deck is running a half dozen, right? If I'm not exactly.
Historically, Hackball has run like 13 hacks.
Wait, what?
Yes. Not kidding.
Okay, well,
yes.
well let's.
But you're also are you
I guess that actually
tutors plus like Vizier
wait,
and things like that?
When you say 13 hacks, I'm not counting tutors that find hacks. I'm talking about hacks.
The only tutor I'm including Mystical Tutor and Merchant Scroll. I think there were 11 true hacks the deck, not counting tutors.
Anyways,
in more, to give you a better base.
This actually helps me make my point. Stop. Okay. This actually helps me make my point better. Those are a combo piece.
Yes,
but like if we look at a deck like Tasigur, that deck is actually only running like 8 or 9 cards that produce green or blue mana and don't hurt you. And you need one of those if Isochron Scepter is to be a win condition.
Yeah, true.
And yet, I don't think people would necessarily like count that as a 3-card combo. Because obviously, you're not like, oh, Arcane Signet is a combo slot when you're putting your Tasigur deck together. Right? Like, your combo slots are stuff like Seasons Past, Isochron Scepter, Dramatic Reversal.
Seasons Past Tasigur.
Beast Within.
What year is this?
Yeah, Beast Within, Reality Shift, exactly.
Yeah.
But, like, those arguably, right, if we're counting a hack and Hackball as a combo piece when you're assembling the combo, I mean, arguably, the rocks are actually even more, like, are actually harder to find in Tasigur than you're less likely to have them when you need them in Tasigur than the hacks are in Hackball.
Sure.
Which, like, I think
a maybe more up-to-date example would be, like, Food Chain, where you have these, like, very redundant win conditions, like, or just Twister Loops in general, where, like, you have these redundant combos like Swan Song. And, like, where, like, if you do ultimately get to the point where you exile enough of them, you can't win, but you aren't actually dedicating them to counterspell slots, to combo slots, because they are just cards like Swan Song.
Yeah, I think what we're learning from this conversation is that this is a question that has 2 different answers in terms of, deck building and in-game, what are combo cards, and how many, is it a 2-card or 1-card combo, and that it's hard to kind of pin down, especially when approaching it from both angles.
There's also the whole, like, there has to be a distinction made between, like, how should you count combo cards and how do people count combo cards, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's a discussion to be had about, like, how should we be counting combo cards, and, like, we should probably be putting qualifiers on combos, being like, hey, this is a 2-card combo, but you need to play X number of dead slots in your deck in order to enable it. Or this is a 2-card combo, but there's an X% like fail rate on it, right?
Yeah, what you'd probably want to say is with your combos, you'd want to count how accessible the cards are, how many dead slots it takes up.
Yeah, but that's versus
that kind of thing.
That's versus like how we actually count combo slots, which is everything sort of has an asterisk on it, but we're just gonna call all of it 2-card combos because they're 2-card combos, right?
Yeah.
Combo slots versus like combo requirements, where like pretty much all the rest of the cards in your deck end up ultimately becoming a combo requirement because you need to be able to protect your combo, enable it by having mana.
Dude, Force of Will is the most powerful combo card in the format.
I think it is also like an interesting one of the aspects that defines a combo piece is like how likely people are to view it as a combo piece in terms of the difficulty of actually assembling the combo. Like going back to the Tasigur example, 8 sources that make blue or green and don't hurt you for the Isochron Scepter combo. Versus, like, I think now it's down, but historically some Gitrog decks have been on, like, 6 discard outlets? Or did it max it at 5?
If we don't count Scourge Familiar, it's always been Putrid Imp, Wild Mongrel, Noose Constrictor, Chains, Oblivion Crown.
So,
I mean, you had Dragoon in your deck at one point.
I was testing Dragoon over a.
It was over something else.
So six. Six historically, 5 now in the current form.
I mean, I don't know how deep ancient history you want to get with Scourge familiar, but
that's
the 6. But you don't you have 5 of these, right? And honestly, for a while, I tested cutting one of the green outlets.
But my point is that like certainly the discard outlet is a combo piece in Gitrog, no matter how much redundancy you have for it.
Yeah, I mean it's very redundant, especially with all the tutors, right? Like there's like probably more than Hackball.
But you still
but the point I'm trying to make is that like
you always count that as a combo piece,
And one of the factors there is the fact that in people's minds it is a combo piece. Like if you cast it without the Gitrog monster in play, it might still get countered. It might eat removal. It might all of these things will happen, which is like very unlikely to happen. Like, maybe someone will have like the biggest heads up play ever, and they'll be like, I think he's going for Scepter, and they'll just like decay your Arcane Signet. But like, probably not. Right?
Yeah. I definitely sort of agree with that. It's like it's how much they actually count as combo pieces. But I think like that still ties back to what noobs were talking about before that, which is like a lot of like what goes into counting a card as a combo piece or not also just like depends on how playable it is outside of like being a combo piece, right? Which I think is also like very related to how much visibility it gets as being a combo piece versus just a card that you play in your deck.
Is Tainted Pact Food Chain a 2-card combo?
Man, people don't counter Tainted Pact or Consult in Food Chain enough. I'm gonna put that out there.
It's dumb.
That's a tough one.
I mean, you should definitely do it like if they do it end step when they're low on mana. But like if you think they're just gonna Tainted Pact for Food Chain, assuming you're not like looking at Flusterstorm or Dispel. I don't know.
They're specifically on the first sliver, not on like a proper outlet. Yeah.
So I've got a question for you guys in terms of we were counting cards as combo or not. How would you classify Golgari, Grave Troll, and Gitrog?
That's a combo piece.
In terms of deck building, it's definitely a combo piece. It's not a combo piece in terms of assembling your combo.
So it's weird. It's kind of weird. You're putting it in there as a specific tutor for one of your combo pieces, and you only run it. You wouldn't people used to run Sylvan Scrying, right? Would you count Sylvan? Because it basically it's you kind of think of it like a better Sylvan Scrying, because Sylvan Scrying does have some utility in being able to find I guess like Cavern of Souls or something, but really what you want is Golgari Grave Troll then turns a bunch of your other creature tutors into Dakmor tutors.
Yeah, sure. I'd still count it as a combo piece though, right? Like it's
would you count Sylvan Scrying as a combo piece? That's
it would really depend on how much utility I was getting out of it.
But like to a degree, yeah. Like I would have counted like in the Flash meta, I count like Summer's Pact as a combo piece, right?
Sure. I feel like we should use the term combo slot when we're talking about deck building, and piece more for like actually assembling.
Sure, it's a slot dedicated to the combo.
Yeah. Okay, that's a lot of conversation on this.
There's a huge amount of conversation.
Yeah.
Thanks for taking
funnily
our shoulders for having to come up with topics.
It's a huge amount of conversation to come back to. It's kind of fuzzy and hard to define, and it might depend on the
I don't feel like we arrived on anything. I feel like we're...
To be fair, though, we never arrive on points for like half of our discussions, and apparently people still appreciate the discussion without the point. Yeah. So, you know what?
Dude, it's the classic cop-out of it was a thought exercise, thought-provoking, We didn't actually provide any answers, but, we made you think.
I think I have to say... I posted it on our Discord, but someone in the YouTube comments of one of our I think it was of our Divine Intervention video said, I'd listen to you guys argue about anything, no complaints here. which honestly like might be the nicest thing anyone's ever said.
I count Godo as a 0-card combo. Who counts Godo as a 1-card combo? Raise your hand. Choose a side.
I count it as an on average 6-card combo because that's how many cards you need to assemble your 11 mana. And, like each mountain is just a part of the combo, right?
True. Whoa, dude, my mind is being blown right now.
In fact, each treasure Darkseid Exorcist makes is a part of the combo.
Combos into Godo. Yes.
Okay, so next up, next question is from patron Tegan, and Tegan asks, "Is MTG a pay-to-win game? With the spiking prices of cards and the way WotC handles reprints by dancing around the secondary market, is the game moving towards a point where it's not economically feasible for new players to get into the game and compete with established players? Are we at that point?" Yeah, and that's right. And she also says this question applies to all formats, not just unsanctioned ones where proxies are relatively accepted. So this is like, we're gonna have to break this question down.
Yeah,
so
but
I would say,
hang on a second before we start. This was actually it was a video about a totally different game, but asking the same question, and they made a really good point that I think is important, which is it really doesn't make sense to discuss pay to win as a binary. Really, the question is it to pay to win?
Well, sure.
Like, obviously, there are elements of pay to win, but
I would say,
the trick is finding the balance.
I would say, like, the general historic answer for, like, Magic as a game over its entire history is it's not exactly pay to win, it's pay to play. Like,
yeah,
you have to.
Well, that's less true than ever with Arena, right?
Yeah, sure. I just, but like,
okay, that's an entire other discussion.
For paper Magic over the entire history of its existence, it has historically been considered a pay-to-play game. You pay money in, and then once you've paid that money in, you then get to play the game. And then winning comes from putting money into the right places and like being a good player at the game in order to win. Right?
Reed, I don't even think that's completely true, because for years you'd be able to go to like an LGS or whatever, and you get one of like their like not an event deck. God, they're like beginner, like just learning the rules, whatever, right, for free.
Intro decks.
Yeah, intro decks, and then there's also like I could go. If some kid came up to you at an LGS and asked for some junk common or whatever that you pulled from a pack or from a draft, are you gonna say like, listen kid, give me 25 cents for this bulk common or this? For this
junk? Like, you shark them for their like super valuable myth.
yeah.
No, but I'm saying like you could probably, and God, this actually reminds me of the format that I suggested like a year ago or something, where it's only it's EDH, but it's only cards that you've acquired for free, like from just going to like drafts with the cards that people leave behind or like GPs and stuff. So it's like you can build decks for free, right? And there is no actual monetary cost for playing Magic, at your kitchen table. Where I mean, some LGSs might charge you, but you can find people and play the game of Magic for free. So it's not even completely pay to play.
Sanctioned Magic is pay to play. Is probably the better way.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. But the kind of point I was trying to make is that a lot of people say, we use the expression, I want to make it so that my opponents can't play Magic, right? And that's stacks decks or control decks and stuff. And really, we kind of use play Magic as a bar for a certain level of participation and kind of like win share, right? If you're not really playing Magic, or a lot of people say you're not really playing Magic if you have like 5% expected win rate with a given deck, right?
Yeah, like if you show up with like a standard event deck from 2 years ago, and that's what you're entering modern tournaments with, like you're not really playing Magic.
So in the sense of, you need to achieve a certain amount of win rate or win shares in order to actually even be playing Magic. It's both pay to play and pay to win.
So yes, I guess, but like, so okay. still talking historically, because I think we'll definitely get into a discussion about whether or not it's become a pay-to-win game recently, but just talking still in the broad strokes of like Magic in general, I feel like it's pay-to-play as like a natural result of how the game was executed / is designed, rather than like intended as being pay-to-win. You know, where like it's pay to play by necessity and pay to win by result of there being an open market for cards, right? Just
sure.
Like the more desirable cards just end up costing more in the secondary market because of whatever, right?
There's demand, like supply and demand.
Like if we isolate it from the secondary market and just say everybody can only acquire cards by purchasing packs, it's not really pay to win, because you're gonna on average pay the same amount to play the same game, right?
That's just not true. That's not true.
I think if you can only buy packs, then
it's much worse.
It's
much worse.
Actually a lot worse, because because then whoever can afford to buy 2 cases of each standard set to make sure they open the 4 of Mythic that they need, is the person who wins.
Sure, I was just saying, like, the 2 cases is the bar to play. It's not a healthy bar, but I'm saying, like,
it's the pay to win threshold where
if
everyone can get their 2 cases,
you're all playing on the same thing.
Yeah,
that's kind of back to my point where I was saying is we sneak in the whole pay to play, pay to win. Like you kind of snuck that in there, right? Where you set the bar to play as opening 2 cases worth of products so that you can build competitive decks. Right?
But I think one of the sort of, like, this is why I think that looking at it as 2 pay to win, like, matters, because at a certain point, like, the numbers are relevant, right? Like, let's pretend that if you spend twice as much, your deck wins 2/3 of the time. Let's look at standard, because that's theoretically the cheapest format to play.
You gain like a 17% win rate.
That's like a problem if we're talking about, I don't know, a $500 deck versus an $1,000 deck. Is that a problem if we're talking about a $20 deck versus a $40 deck?
I think and a kind of thing too is you've got to look at the curve, right? If there was no kind of, like, if you imagine that games of Magic were literally just decided by whoever can pull the most money out of their wallet and slap it on the table, you know? I mean, metaphorically, that's how Magic is, right? But if there's literally no ceiling on how much money you can pump into the game and increase your win rate, then that's like maximum pay to win, right? Whereas Magic and most games operate where you're generally seeing an increase in win rate as you're putting more money in, but it flattens out, right?
There's diminishing returns to...
You can only put in as much money as the most expensive deck in the format. Like, as an actual
and the kind of
ceiling.
Bar, I guess, the bar for I wouldn't... It's almost like pay to compete is the proper term, right? Like, because that's the way people view it. It's so pay to win. You know, it's like I can't just spend $100 and have a tier 1 modern deck.
So actually,
right?
I came up with...
You need to pay to compete.
I came up with an interesting thought, like, just now. Is that, like, if we... But, like, is... In a weird way, isn't standard and rotating formats, like, aren't they more pay to win than Legacy is? Or, like, Legacy or Modern or Eternal formats, where, like, in Eternal formats...
You're putting money in and you're not getting it back?
Well, in Eternal formats, the deck being more expensive isn't necessarily an indicator of the win rate. Like, the most expensive deck in Legacy isn't the best deck in Legacy. Whereas, like, I feel like that relationship is a lot more direct in standard or rotating formats, where, like, I feel like a majority of the time the most expensive deck in standard is, like, the best deck, or like second or third best deck.
So I think
like, look at mono red and mono white. Those decks have been very, very cheap in standard, and so like I've won tons of events. I mean, mono white recently was I think it was several months ago, where it was like they were doing just stuff with like indestructible creatures and using venerated Loxodon. It was kind of like a meta buster at the time, but that deck was dirt cheap and was winning. And then obviously mono red has been pretty strong since Dominaria. So like those decks have been very, very cheap.
So I guess this is also like this is again where I think bringing, like, yes, it's let's assume for a moment that the most expensive decks are the most winningest decks. You know, we can, that, like, they may not be, but even if they are, this is where I think, like, the numbers really matter, because, like, it fundamentally comes down to, like, how much of an ask is it on people to win?
Yeah.
And, like, that's going to vary from person to person, from, like, I mean, region to region, even. You know, like, I've spoken with some people who live in places where, you know, the average minimum wage or like the minimum wage is, you know, 20% of what it is in the USA, you know, let alone somewhere like Canada. So then it's like, okay, well, now how much does a standard deck cost? Does it cost like a week's take-home pay, a month's, a year's? Like, and when, you know, when does that, like, that sort of has to factor into the threshold of what it is to make something pay to win? Because I didn't actually get an answer, but it seemed like if the $40 deck has a 17% win rate advantage over the $20 deck, that's not really a problem, right? Because it's very realistic, at least in North America and most of Western Europe. It's very realistic for someone to pony up the $20 and compete on an even playing field, even though that is egregiously pay to win, like, sort of in a context-free analysis. So, like, this is where the actual prices, like, really do start to matter. You know, you can't just look at the curve without a scale. You do actually have to look at the scale in terms
factor in the value of your dollar.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, wow.
It's really the quality of the time to win, because time is a payment for money.
Yeah, and so I would say that, like, yeah, Legacy in particular, with, like, any format where reserve list cards are legal, is going to just become increasingly pay to win over time, because a lot of the cards on the reserve list are busted, and they're only getting more expensive, and there's not really a solution in the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
Like, I'm looking at the most popular Legacy decks. Yeah, maybe the most expensive one, which is
like
it's on 4 cradles.
No, it's 4 lands. Or sorry, 4 color lands.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think that's not showing on whatever I'm looking at. But whatever, let's say it's $5,000.
Yeah.
Like, the cheapest deck that shows on the first page of MTG Goldfish, which is the top 12 most popular decks in Legacy, the cheapest one is still over $2,000. So, you know, maybe this isn't a perfect representation, but it certainly looks like if you want a competitive Legacy deck, you are dropping thousands, or at least 1,000 and a substantial fraction of the next 1,000 on it.
Yeah, man, this actually, it's so you could write a whole, like, you know, thesis on you know, get a solid book going on just the nuances of this, because Matt was mentioning, you know, or he jokingly mentioning about the time, the value of your time, right? Imagine you need to spend to get some MMO or something, right? You need to spend, you know, hours and hours and hours grinding, right? But you didn't have to necessarily put in a penny. Is that like where do you throw that into the equation, right? Like, if someone can jump the line and spend that you know, $20 to save themselves 10 hours, is that really pay to win? Because, you know, someone else could spend the 10 hours doing that. How much do you value your time? Then there's all the aspects.
Yeah, and then what if it's 100 hours? What if it's...
Yeah. Dude, the luckiest games of Magic that I've consistently won were the ones based on Wheel of Fortune that I originally bought only for $20. Now it's $300. See, that's really where the skill of the game comes to effect.
See, the skill of the game really comes from the meta game of speccing on cards. And what determines,
this is why I'm a big fan
what
of
determines your skill of the game is how well your specs perform over time.
That's right.
Well, see, I'm a big fan of a friend of the show, Dave. He has this method. Instead of rolling dice for deciding who goes first in a game of EDH, what you do is you cut the deck, and whoever flips the card with the highest monetary value gets to go first. So I'm a big fan of that because it really emphasizes
the pay to win
and really introduces the pay to win aspect. Yeah. Rewards you for buying foil versions of cards, masterpieces. But see,
why add randomness, right?
Because if it ends up becoming the fact that maybe the first person isn't the highest win percentage and maybe the person in the second slot is the highest win percentage, then there's a metagame around. So you want to have the second highest average.
No, you don't, because you just want to be sitting next to the person with the highest average.
So it becomes you roll dice to see. Okay,
staying a little bit more on topic, I think I'm pretty comfortable in saying that all of the non-rotating formats are too pay to win in my book, especially the ones where reserveless cards are important, but even modern to an extent. Actually, okay, maybe I don't actually know enough about Pioneer and how much decks cost, but all of the other like modern, legacy, vintage, commander are too pay to win in my view, and standard for me fluctuates depending on
what
essentially how much, like what's the cheapest of like the top 5 standard decks at a time is kind of what determines that for me. And like I think if you can build like a deck that can completely reasonably take down large tournaments for maybe around $200, then that's totally fine. Like if there's nothing cheaper than that, $400, okay, now that's, and like this is purely subjective on like how much I think stuff is worth, which is not any sort of, I don't have any particular insight
that on the time twister.
Yeah, I don't have any particular insight that anyone else doesn't have.
Let's have a conversation between the people of the podcast who don't own time twisters.
Down.
Okay.
We just need to, like, the 2 people who talk the most, they're the ones who we just gotta
who need more time on the podcast to talk more.
You should have made better investments earlier on. That's all I'm saying.
Also, Reed, you should have just been older and therefore gotten through your education faster.
Privileged to win,
I should have been just born earlier so I could have bought cards cheaper.
Yeah.
It's just, dude, age equals skill, right?
Born too late to born too late to buy RL. Born too early
to see the RL abolished. Born just in time to relish in the memes.
So I want to give my final spiel on this subject. So I think I want to say that Magic itself is not a pay-to-win game, because Magic is not just, modern. It's not just Commander. It's all these formats, right? You can play Magic
with cards I
compete basically for free. So there's a great format. I don't know if I'm sure.
Dude.
Reed, you watch Caleb Gannon,
Penny
right?
Dreadful is a great format.
I was going there. So Caleb Gannon is a YouTuber who Magic YouTuber who's gained a lot of popularity over the past, I guess, year, and he's been playing Penny Dreadful, which is like a community-run format on MTGO, where it's all cards that cost like under 0.01 ticks or whatever.
I think it's 0.02 was under 0.02 was
so the format is constantly rotating based on if cards were doing well last season, they're probably spiking up in price.
It's just it self-balances because all the most popular cards spike up in price and then you can't play them for the next season. But
you can also play for free because of like mana traders and stuff. Like they let you rent these cards for free. So you are literally competing at the highest level. You can play whatever meta decks you want for free, right? So if that's the kind of thing that exists in Magic, I mean, there's also like very cheap drafts that you can do.
Pauper is also an incredibly cheap format. It is endorsed by Wizards of the Coast and has like sanctioned FNMs.
Yeah, so you can play Magic, and obviously once you spend money on Magic, right? If you're just playing Magic at your kitchen table with cards you have, right? You against friends, you're playing Magic for free. So I don't think inherently Magic is a pay to win game. Now, a lot of people, it's about their whatever formats they're interested in. Is Modern pay to win? And with this, I think a lot of bias kind of comes from the people who say this, and I don't get like too dicey here, but the thing is, I think a lot of people, when they say that, what they mean is is it pay to win to have the most competitive deck, right? It's basically people kind of griping about the most competitive deck, the tier 1, tier 0 decks are out of their price range, whereas I think like I am interested in a lot of budget Modern decks, like mono green Stompy, and I guess actually a very strong deck though that people were playing for not for budget reasons, just because it was strong and performing well. Also happens to be very budget is the mono white tokens deck in Modern. Like these decks are very cheap to play, and you can have a successful win rate. Like you can have a reasonable win rate. So like ultimately, I don't think it's pay to win because you can play competitive decks or reasonably competitive decks for cheap. But people kind of, I think, get caught up in it's pay to win to play the deck that I want to play, or it's too expensive to play that deck, or it's too expensive to be the tier 1 all the time, or to not just have a tier 1 deck, but because Modern and all these standard formats or standard legacy blah blah blah, they're all rotating what's the best deck, right? So if you want to like play Modern and always have a tier 1 deck, it's going to cost a lot of money. But I don't think that's like necessarily a bad thing. I think that's kind of just people getting in their own head for kind of no good reason. Although I will say there is one downside with the finances of Magic, and we were talking about WotC with, or this was in the question with WotC and reprints and secondary market and cards spiking and whatnot. Magic cards in general, not just reserve list. Magic cards in general, if you kind of like create an index fund of Magic cards, or like playable Magic cards, so like whatever's in the Modern set, Legacy, EDH staples, these cards have all been going up in price for years, like consistently growing.
Like
card index
outpacing inflation growing.
Yeah, like so I made an ultra budget Yisen deck maybe like 2 years ago or something, and that I was ultra budget. It was under $50, and I would try to make it as competitive as I could. Last time I checked, it was like $170 to buy that deck. So it's cards are going up and staples are going up at a very that's much steeper than the average index is going, but the trend is true where Magic staples in general are going up in price, and the way that the growing card pool and the amount of new staples getting added to the format and the card pool of Magic in general, Wizards cannot keep pace in terms of reprints. I think that's a worrying trend, that no matter what, however many master sets they put out, new cards are getting introduced that are going to be expensive. And then as more people are playing Magic, the supply is dwindling, and these cards are constantly increasing in price. So, Magic getting more expensive to play is a bit concerning.
Yeah, that is true. Like, if there's 20,000 cards in the card pool, even if they reprint like 1,000 cards every year, that still means, obviously, there's a bunch of like functional reprints and whatever, but even if we cut that like way down, we say there's like, 5,000 sort of playable cards in Magic that aren't like, put in there for draft formats or whatever. Cards that someone might want to buy as a single. And they reprint like somewhere, 800 to 1,000 of them every year. That's like 5 to 7 years for a reprint. And then the card pool is increasing. So 5 years from now, maybe that number's up to 6,000. And they're still reprinting.
And the reprint probably won't reset the price, like to the point that it was before, like the last printing. Yeah. It's just like, yeah.
What happens when Magic gets cheap? People build more decks. Like, it's not like, oh wow, now there's this, and anyone, I don't need another version, another copy of this expensive staple. Like if overnight Doubling Season got reprinted to like so much. Like people would just who don't have doubling seasons already would buy it, and people who do would buy more to put it in a bunch of decks. That's just the nature of good cards, right? And then I guess my final point on this is in terms of like EDH specifically. CEDH, obviously proxies are acceptable, and you can play it online for free. So is it pay to win? Like, yes, if you want to actually own the cards, but many places don't require you to own cards for unsanctioned events. And then for regular EDH, it's not pay to win unless you are listening to the command zone and being like, wow, I need a Vidalcan Orrery in every deck. You don't need all these expensive cards. Most CDH players or anyone could build a very, very competitive deck in terms of like mid power or something like that. Not just trying to pub stomp, but just being able to compete on that power level for very cheap. So I don't think it's pay to win.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure like the 2 games I played with my ultra budget Unesh deck back when it was still legal.
Because Paradox Engine rip.
For budgetary reasons and for card legality reasons.
Yeah. Like when, I played it because it was like the deck I had on me and people were playing like I had like competitive decks and that, and people were like, oh, we want to play our casual decks. Like it certainly did not feel fair against decks that were like much more expensive, probably, several $100s in the mid power range. And it was like, okay, this deck's $50, and if I was going all out, this would, be stomping pretty hard. So certainly, like I said, EDH was pay to win. I was referring to the top end of the format.
Yeah.
Because once you start imposing sort of artificial power ceilings, it becomes a lot easier to budget.
I think EDH also just as a format is pretty. It's really hard to eke out, that extra 2% or 5% win rate over the pod. It's just very chemistry, high school chemistry, like the solutions where you can keep adding like acids or whatever to it, but it like kind of balances out whatever. Buffer solutions, there we go. EDH has a very strong buffer in the format where if a power level gets too high, people it becomes like a 3-on-1 or arch enemy. So the power level tends to be pretty even keel for a lot of things. So it's kind of a special exception in terms of Magic formats, I think. Yeah. Is that it for this topic?
Did we get through it?
Yeah.
Okay. So then our next question, Matt, you can give us one to read.
Sure. First, with Oubliette's recent errata due to reprint, where it now phases out the target creature rather than exiling it, will this become Siege viable as a way to more permanently remove commanders from play and the game? Secondly, if it does see play at casual and competitive, how likely of a ban target do you think it will be? We know that there has been a concerted effort to remove elements from the game which are deemed unfun, like tucking. So could Oubliette see a flurry of play than the Banhammer?
So,
and this question comes to us from patron Ender 666666.
Thank you.
As context, it hasn't seen the flurry of play since.
Yeah, because this was
maybe it's slightly updated, but I feel like the answer to this question would have been similar, even if we had recorded this right at the errata.
If we had done it on time when this question was asked.
we have the experience and foresight to realize that Oubliette is, even with the errata, is basically just like a bunch of other cards that already exist. So like the whole permanently removing commanders from play thing, I mean, there's Darkseid Mutation, Kenrith Transformation, Song of the Dryads, Imprisoned in the Moon. Like, that's nothing new.
Nevermore effects to keep them from coming down in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I guess the advantage, like the one thing Oubliette has over those is that you can't get your commander back immediately. Like, but that's a pretty narrow, like the fact that you have to wait until your next untap.
Yeah.
But that's like a pretty minor advantage for like the fact that you don't have to, recast it.
And so like, the other thing for me is like, because I play Pauper, Oubliette isn't even really good in Pauper. So, like, the fact that it's not even a good enough card to see play in the commons only format is sort of telling to me.
Okay, that is not fair because Pauper
in the Legacy
is
Light
busted.
format.
Like, if it was going to see play, the only reason it's going to see play is to remove commanders, which aren't a thing in Pauper.
Sure. I'm just saying, like, as a general card quality thing, it's not good enough aside from removing commanders, and it doesn't necessarily remove commanders so much better than stuff that we already have.
Dude, calling Pauper, like, I mean, it's obviously true to call it the commons only format, but that like definitely undersells just how powerful that format is.
Yeah, dude,
Oubliette's not even good enough for a high power commander.
They've been Gush, they've been Daze, they've been Git Probe.
Yeah, dude, Daze, Git Probe, basically Force of Will with foil. Like, that was, my God. Yeah. In terms of concerted ban to remove unfun things like Commander Tuck, I think Commander Tuck was, I guess, a bit of fun, but also just logistics.
It's a technical issue,
logistically, I think, Morgan, you can speak to this a bit more. Like, the fact that a card is a commander is an important aspect of its identity that needs to be tracked.
There's a lot of weird shit that goes on with commander rules and, like, the physicality of the commander card in your deck being that basically you just have to always, by the rules, you have to always know exactly where your commander is.
Well, it's more you have to know if a given card is your commander.
Sure.
Is the which works out the same way, but just the technical.
Yeah.
So, like, they can point at, like, the 17th card in your library and be like, is that your commander? And you have to know. But you can't be allowed to know which card is your commander when you're shuffling your library.
I have presented a meta loop. I'm going to ask you to identify all the cards in your deck. Starting from the top.
Is this one your commander? Is this one your commander?
Dude, you start giving queries, like, faster than they're able to answer them, and you just call it judge, and you're like, judge.
Wow, we said this wasn't his commander, but it was.
My opponent's too buffered, and I think that's...
I think the other thing is we saw like a very minor amount of discussion about Draneth Magistrate, where members of the Rules Committee in CAG did not seem to think that it was an issue at all.
And apparently from Twitter polls, a lot of EDH players in general don't care about it. So.
I'm crying.
And that seems
crying.
That seems like way more of an
like...
unfun anti-commander card than Oubliette will ever be.
I can't believe Iona is banned, but Draneth is fine. It's just so sad. So sad.
I mean,
that card is way more unfun than Iona.
You can't remove an Iona, right? Wink, wink. Nudge, nudge.
I don't think, I think the banning reasoning behind Iona doesn't exactly line up with Draneth in that regard.
It's certainly a comparable thing, though.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, I think the argument is just you can do other stuff.
Yeah.
You can somehow distill the playability of those cards down to... yeah, sure.
Definitely not CDH viable. Like, the only similar card that actually sees play is Song of the Dryads, and that's because it removes, like, anything, and that's only in decks where...
Exactly, Yasan Savola.
Only in decks where you need that removal. Yeah.
Okay, wait, but I think what you're failing to consider is that the year is 20XX, and everyone plays Crick with TAS levels of efficiency. And tournaments are decided by who can oubliette their opponent's Crick.
And then, in terms of ban... Obviously,
the recent spoiler is just
spoiled
the mono black card that can remove enchantments.
That is true. Oh my god.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I actually did not expect that. That was probably one of the most surprising things. I know we weren't going to talk about this set yet, but it's like one of the most surprising things in the set.
For next episode,
clearly what we can take away from this is that the RC doesn't think Oubliette is a problem, but WotC does. Right? That's...
Yeah.
They got a print removal for Oubliette now that it phases out. And just as a quick reminder before we move on, that if you would like to submit listener questions, either for a mailbag episode or just generally, that you can send those to us on our Discord server, which will be linked below, and that patrons get access to a special channel for priority listener questions.
Well, before we close out the show, it's time for a return of everyone's favorite segment, Gut Check!
Gut check!
Gut check.
Dude, I've missed, peaking all of the levels on our audio.
Yeah.
It's a favorite part of Gut Check.
Okay, at least you're aware. I don't know if that makes it better or worse.
But honestly, waiting all this time is going to be great because we must just have a bank of a ton of quality gut checks ready.
Dude, I bet this is just going to be the best gut check so far. 100%.
Okay. Why you gotta set me up like that, first of all? Second, this is so bad because I thought of this pre-show and I've been trying to think about it throughout the episode and I have not picked an answer yet. So,
that's good. Yeah.
This is going to be dangerous. Okay. So the gut check is, what is your favorite standard set of all time or, in recent memory? And this could be for whatever reason you want, not just because, it's a great draft format or this was great for standard. I'm just talking about like a standard legal set. So not like Modern Horizons or, fucking some Double Master or something. And this is about a standard legal set, and for whatever reason,
can we do a block, or is it just sets?
No. Sure, you can do a block. Okay, and then we'll have to cut a lot of this time as we all ponder deeply.
I think I got mine.
I think I know. I think I've actually known for a while. Yeah, maybe I'm gonna have trouble with the reasoning of this, but my favorite standard legal set of all time, I think, was War of the Spark, strictly based on.
Your love of Free Fairy?
Yeah, pretty much. No, just I think the cards I think they're very fresh in comparison to sets before, and I was very happy to see I was excited. I think this is one of the sets with the most exciting spoiler seasons, and I've kind of been living off that hype for a while. All of these cards I think are really awesome and power-wise, and are also very interesting power-wise. They're not just generically powerful, except obviously for Nissa and and then Teferi.
Narset.
We got Bolus set. Well, Narset's I don't know. Well, yeah, arbitrary reasoning. That's part of the gut check.
So with the context that I don't play a huge amount of standard and historically haven't played a huge amount of standard, I really enjoyed the Shadows over Innistrad block / Eldritch Moon block, not from a flavor perspective or anything, but the cards and decks that were good when that set was in rotation, I just found very appealing.
So I want to, before I'm going to give my answer, I guess after Morgan, but I kind of want to jump in because I definitely considered giving that as an answer because sentimentally, that was the first set I went for a pre-release for. And I just really I vibe with the themes of what's going on there and, pretty hyped for, I guess they announced that we're going back to Innistrad again next year, right?
Are we? That's pretty cool.
I think so, yeah. There's I don't think it was the actual set names, but it's a 2-set thing that they said Innistrad Vampires, Innistrad Werewolves was spoiled
cool.
on their plan. So that could just be code names, but yeah, interesting. But yeah, I thought about giving that as an answer. Morgan, do you want to go or do you want me to go?
I can go. I definitely, I one of my favorite sort of sets and blocks is Alara block. I think it had a lot of flavor. It was a really interesting world with the whole being split into the shards. But I've done the throwback drafts on Magic Online a decent amount, and those were a lot of fun. But I think if I'm gonna say a set that I was actually playing Magic when it came out, I'd have to say Dominaria. I think it hit a good sweet spot in terms of power level. There's obviously some. I mean, Teferi's a very unfun card, but other than that, there's a lot of very powerful cards. There were some cards that I think were really healthy and standard, Cast Down. I thought was a really, that was I enjoyed that card, and things like Seal Away, where there's like good removal, but then some big splashy bombs, so it was like a good draft format, and obviously it was also just like a massive flavor throwback to like the entirety of the Magic storyline, which was pretty cool too.
I think the whole thing with like having so many legends in the set also sort of helps with like the character of the set. Just like there are like so many recognizable bombs as well as just like, instead of like what you would usually have in draft formats, which is just like unnamed like green bomb number 1 that's the best in the draft format. Oh, here's the best red bomb in the format. Like they actually have like names attached to them, right? A lot of the time.
Also, honestly, there's an argument that Dominaria is like the most important Magic set in recent history. I met a ton of people at the LGS who were like, I came back to Magic because of Dominaria.
Well, it also was it the set that most closely coincided with the like actual public release of Arena?
Was it?
No, I think the maybe. I know I came to Arena, and this is maybe jumping the gun on my answer. So for just quickly, when you guys gave your answers, were they all based off of sets that you played during?
I mean, Alara wasn't, but Dominaria was.
Sort of.
Yeah.
I was taking into account like in recent memory and also like that I enjoyed. Like I enjoyed watching a lot of stuff from the set that I gave, and I played a bit.
So, because I started playing Arena with the Ravnica, like Return to Ravnica block.
Return to Ravnica.
Yeah, Return to Ravnica. And that was fun to play, and that was probably the most fun time I had playing Standard. So I guess, but Arena was launched with Dominaria, right?
No, because I think it was. Well, I think it went into open beta, maybe, or I don't know.
Yeah, but then all that shit got wiped, right, with Kaladesh and stuff. Right?
Whatever. Yeah, probably. It was a very important point. Like it was a very important set.
No,
release.
I think the open beta was actually after, like substantially after Dominaria, because Dominaria was the spring set, right?
Yeah, and the fall set was the Return to Ravnica.
Wait, what was the summer set?
I think that was.
Oh, I guess it would have been M19, right? It was in 2018. Yeah,
yes.
It just would have been M19.
Okay. But yeah, so for my answer, I've sneakily given 2 answers already.
I'm going last next time, all right?
For my next 2. So I picked mine based off of like I just troll through Scryfall like all the time. I mean, I don't actually use Scryfall. I use Decked Builder, which is like an app that I have on my phone.
Okay.
And
shout out.
But I just scroll through cards all the time and for building decks. And what a lot of what I kind of like to do is look at the similarities of cards. Like, oh wow, all of these cards are from this set or blah blah blah. And cards that come up all the time, or the set that comes up all the time or blocks are Time Spiral block and Kamigawa block.
Kamigawa block comes up all the time. What are you searching?
What are you playing?
Well, a lot of cards that I enjoy. Kamigawa block is not necessarily for like a bunch of like super stapley stuff, but a lot of the commanders from that block I think are really cool. Obviously Godo, just love Godo. Love me some Godo. No, but like Azusa, the Moon Folk. Like there's just a bunch of really cool stuff going on in Kamigawa that I don't know, just appeals to me in terms of how kind of interesting it is. I mean, obviously people have problems with some of the mechanics and stuff going on in Kamigawa, but I don't know. I found some of the stuff to be pretty interesting.
How could we forget the classic sweep? Oh baby, there was a mechanic.
Can I just quickly pick a non-standard legal set? Because I'm just gonna do it. Battle Bond is a sick set. Battle Bond is
Battle great. Hype as fuck. Dude, if we were picking non-standard, dude, I could also pick Conspiracy.
Non-standard, no reprint.
Dude, conspiracy was the first magic. That was Matt luring me into
good. True conspiracy. Was the friends you made along the way.
Come here, kid. I've got some candy for you.
No, my value prop for that was, you can get a foil Dark Vaden, which is $300.
Yeah. Did you open anything? Was there anything good in that box?
No.
I remember at the LGS that I was going to at the time. I forget what it was. It might have been face to face. I don't know. Whatever. No, it couldn't have been. I think it was ANSI. Whatever. I remember somebody opening up a foil Leovold in store during one of the drafts. Yeah, which was like the most expensive card in that set at the time.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this has been a nostalgia trip. So that wraps up.
That
for this
was a
episode.
good gut check, actually. Sorry, just to. That was a good long-winded gut check.
I appreciate it. I came up with that real quick. So that wraps it up for this episode. If you guys would like to reach out to us with any questions, comments, or concerns, you can contact us on Twitter at IntoNorthPod, via our email, intonorthpodcast@gmail.com, or on our Discord server, the invite link for which can be found in the description for this episode. An extra special thanks to all of our patrons who help cover the expenses for our show and allow us to work towards improving the quality of the podcast. If you too would like to become a Patreon, we are at patreon.com/IntoNorthPodcast. Another way you can support us is via our TCG Player affiliate link. So anytime you want to purchase something from TCG Player, if you use our affiliate link, which will be in the description, a portion of your purchase goes towards supporting the podcast. Thank you as always to the band Vox Cadre for our lovely podcast music, to Nate Slover for our equally lovely podcast logo, and to our long-suffering podcast editor Roadkill. Next episode will be out in 2 weeks. Until then, see ya.
Bye.
Peace.
Have a good one.
Anyone else physically wave in this section? I sometimes wave.
I definitely wave.
Yeah.